06:37 a.m. June 6, 1944. Normandy, France. The air is thick with salt and smoke. In the cramped command bunker overlooking Widerstandsnest 62, Captain Dietrich Müller's stomach lurches as the ground shakes. The distant thunder of naval artillery clashes with the unmistakable sound of dozens of landing craft scraping against the beaches of Omaha. He grips the tactical map, his gloved hands damp with sweat beneath wool. Reports are already trickling in through failing telephone lines. The American forces are coming in harder than German intelligence had predicted. His men are scattered across defensive positions from Vierville to Colville, but communications are degrading rapidly. The distant growl of tanks pushing through sand blends with the deafening sound of MG-42 machine guns and naval shells. "Verdammt," Müller mutters under his breath. A single flare cuts the sky above the beachhead, the signal from forward observers. It's too late for reinforcements now. His mind races through contingencies, knowing the coming hours will either validate years of coastal defense or render them meaningless. The bunker smells of stale cigarette smoke, concrete dust, and damp earth seeping through inadequate waterproofing. Captain Dietrich Müller stares through the narrow observation slit of Widerstandsnest 62, watching American LCVP assault craft approach through morning haze, churning the channel in formations larger than predicted. The sound of distant naval guns is incessant, 16-inch shells from battleships offshore, each impact registering through the bunker's reinforced walls. What cuts through most are the screams, faint but unmistakable across 500 meters of killing zone. His men are in position along the bluffs, but their resolve wavers with each salvo. Müller exhales slowly, wiping condensation from his binoculars. The others focus on approaching targets, hands steady on weapons, each soldier bound to a defensive post that had seemed impregnable until Allied bombers missed their targets inland. Müller shifts uncomfortably, boots heavy with responsibility and the weight of his Feldgrau uniform. He knew this moment would come, the invasion everyone anticipated but couldn't pinpoint. Nothing in his career, from Poland to the Eastern Front, had prepared him for this scale. From fragmentary reports, there was no sign of the 352nd Infantry Division reinforcements supposed to arrive from St. Lo. The Americans were not allowing time to regroup, and the beach was now barely 400 meters away. Suddenly, a blinding flash rips through the dawn as a 5-inch naval shell lands near the western draw, throwing up massive clouds of sand and shattered concrete. Müller feels the concussion in his chest cavity. His hands shake momentarily, but he steadies them against cold stone. "We hold our ground," Müller barks to the men around him in the command post. He knows they're listening, but he also knows their doubt. The 716th Static Division had been rated as low combat value, filled with overage soldiers and Eastern volunteers. The resistance is weakening before contact even begins. Through his binoculars, Müller counts landing craft, far more than the dozen intelligence had suggested. He reaches for the field telephone, cranking the handle. Static crackles back. The naval bombardment has severed most landlines. Records later showed that of the 85 defensive positions along Omaha, fewer than 15 maintained communication after 06:45. Müller was among the isolated. Müller presses his back against the cold stone of the bunker as the first wave of American soldiers charges through surf and sand. The sound of boots thudding against beach is drowned by the staccato fire from MG-42 positions, 1,200 rounds per minute from each emplacement. A sound like tearing canvas. He knows this is only the beginning, but even that knowledge carries weight. He pulls the radio handset to his ear, waiting for word from higher command at the 84th Corps headquarters. Static hisses back. "We are cut off," his second in command, Lieutenant Oscar Weber, reports, voice strained through interference. A former school teacher from Heidelberg, Weber had never expected to command coastal artillery. Müller swears under his breath in Swabian dialect. He knows that losing contact with divisional command is catastrophic, but there's no time to dwell on it. The Americans have broken through wire obstacles in several sectors, and their engineer teams are clearing mines faster than anticipated. The situation is deteriorating with frightening speed. In the distance, he hears the distinctive whine of a P-47 Thunderbolt. The Americans have achieved air superiority, and Müller knows it's only hours before the full Allied weight descends. They need to hold the high ground. German doctrine emphasized defense in depth, but most of Rommel's beach obstacles remained incomplete. A 75mm pack gun barks from a casemate to his left, its shell striking an approaching landing craft. Orange flame blooms across the water, but for every craft disabled, 3 more appear through smoke. Müller watches the landing craft, their sheer numbers overwhelming careful calculation. This is different from intelligence estimates. Field Marshal Rommel had predicted the invasion would come at high tide, but the Americans landed at low tide, exposing themselves to longer killing zones, but also revealing the beach obstacles clearly. The thought races through his mind with cold clarity. If they lose here, everything changes. The Western Front opens. The two-front war becomes unsustainable. The sound of American landing forces pressing inland is like a drumbeat in Müller's consciousness. His focus narrows to the immediate tactical situation. He watches through smoke as infantrymen from the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions take cover behind beach obstacles, returning fire from scattered positions. His men, exhausted from months of static defense and inadequate rations, are responding, but the weight of their fatigue is palpable. The steady push of American forces is becoming geometrically apparent. Wave follows wave with mechanical precision. Müller watches as a younger fighter, barely 19, screams out from a forward position. His leg has been torn by mortar fragments, American 60mm rounds walking up the bluff. The blood spreads fast across sand, already dark with salt water. Müller can only stand there, momentarily frozen, unable to do more than direct defensive fire at advancing infantry. The training manuals never address this scale of assault. The sky above flickers with sharp, bright flashes of exploding shells. The world outside the bunker is a haze of smoke, fire, and the overpowering stench of cordite and torn flesh. He pulls his coat tighter, trying to block out the cacophony. Müller looks toward the horizon where the invasion fleet sits, an armada of 6,000 vessels. The sight of American forces coming in successive waves is unlike anything in his experience. The plan to slow them with interlocking fields of fire, the beach obstacles, the artillery registered on pre-plotted coordinates. Nothing seemed adequate. His heart beats faster, adrenaline mixing with dread. There's no relief coming. A radio intercept later revealed that the 21st Panzer Division, supposedly held in reserve for counterattack, was still awaiting authorization from OKW headquarters. The storm is coming, and the breakwaters are already failing. The fog of war is closing in with almost physical presence. The bunker's air grows thick, choked with dust from near misses and the acrid smell of overheated machine gun barrels. Müller's mind races through fragmentary orders, past the chaos, but he cannot maintain situational awareness across the entire sector. The radio crackles weakly in his hand, battery power draining. He forces himself to focus on immediate threats. "We're losing control of the beach, sir," Lieutenant Weber reports, but his voice is drowned by another barrage from destroyers that have closed to within 1,000 meters. unprecedented naval gunfire support, firing almost point-blank at shore targets. The American forces have pushed beyond the first tidal terrace, and Müller knows they won't stop until they reach the bluff roads. He had been told the defensive positions would allow controlled killing zones, but it's clear now they are fighting for bare survival. His thoughts shift to the men under his command. 400 soldiers spread across 2 kilometers of coastline. They're not retreating en masse, but they're outnumbered 3-1 and surrounded by naval fire heavier than anything the Wehrmacht encountered in North Africa. The beach was supposed to be defended by superior artillery positions and interlocking fire, but with continuous bombardment from Allied ships, those defensive advantages are eroding rapidly. At the far edge of the beach, through smoke and haze, he can see the squat profile of a Sherman tank rolling off a disabled landing craft. The noise of its tracks is almost inaudible beneath artillery thunder as it claws through sand toward the seawall. For a brief moment, Müller wonders how many men have died so the Americans can advance another 10 meters. The arithmetic of attrition was supposed to favor the defense. Reality is proving otherwise. Through the chaos, Müller focuses on the one variable he can still influence, his immediate command. They're entrenched in reinforced positions, but not unbreakable. Concrete crumbles under sustained naval fire. His thoughts scramble as he watches an American sergeant, exhausted but determined, rally men behind a disabled tank. The training is evident in their movements. Then it happens. The breakthrough. A gap opens in the wire obstacles near the Vierville draw. American engineers have blown a path through mines. Within minutes, infantry pours through like water, finding a crack. The beachhead is no longer a continuous defensive line. Müller watches as more Shermans roll forward, ploughing through remaining obstacles. This is the irreversible moment, the tipping point where defense becomes retreat. Weber appears at his shoulder, face pale beneath dust. "Sir, the western positions are requesting permission to fall back." Müller hesitates. Doctrine says hold at all costs. Reality says the line is already broken. He makes the calculation, preserve the force or die in place. "Authorized," he says quietly, fighting withdrawal to the secondary line. The order passes through runners since telephone lines are dead. Later records would show that German forces inflicted nearly 5,000 American casualties on Omaha Beach. But casualties alone don't stop determined attackers with overwhelming material advantage. Müller scrambles to make sense of fragmentary reports flooding in through runners and the few working field telephones. There's no coherent picture anymore, just scattered data points. The American breakthrough is expanding. German positions are being bypassed, surrounded, eliminated methodically. Every minute another strongpoint falls silent. The bunker shakes again as a 14-inch shell from USS Texas explodes barely 50 meters away, and for a split second, Müller considers his narrowing options. There is no organized retreat possible under this fire. He glances at the men around him, beyond exhaustion, some wounded, others staring blankly at tactical maps that no longer reflect reality. He looks at the radio again, still only static. At this moment, the tide of war, literal and metaphorical, has shifted irrevocably. Documents later revealed that German commanders had expected to repel the invasion within 48 hours. By 0822, less than 2 hours after first landing, that assumption was demonstrably false. The Atlantic Wall had failed its first major test. The smell of gunpowder and blood fills the bunker's ventilation system, mixed with salt spray and burning rubber. The fight for the beachhead is no longer about tactical advantage, it's about survival and retreat. Müller's men are falling back now in small groups, but they're not running in panic. They're simply overwhelmed by material superiority they cannot match. The land visible through observation slits is strewn with bodies, torn equipment, and debris from both sides. Through the smoke, Müller sees a group of American soldiers, uniforms soaked and covered in sand, advancing with grim purpose up the bluff. They are relentless in a way that suggests unlimited reserves. One of his radio men collapses against the bunker wall, shrapnel wound bleeding through field dressing. Müller, his mind numb from sustained stress, watches as enemy forces push systematically forward. His men have no place left to defend. The position has become untenable. In his jacket pocket he carries a letter from his wife in Stuttgart. He wonders if he'll live to answer it. The thought is brief, clinical. There's no time for sentiment. Müller gathers what remains of his immediate command staff. The German command bunker is no longer a symbol of strength, but a trap, reinforced concrete that will become a tomb if they wait too long. They're effectively surrounded, with American forces controlling the draws and beginning to probe inland. There's no realistic hope of counterattack. Wehrmacht doctrine emphasized aggressive response to breakthroughs, but doctrine assumed available reserves. The reserves are either destroyed, pinned down, or still awaiting orders from higher command paralyzed by communication breakdown. The last of the German artillery shells explode in pre-registered defensive fires, and then the guns fall silent, either destroyed or out of ammunition. Outside, American forces have achieved their first objectives. With heavy heart and professional calculation, Müller orders a final defensive action to cover withdrawal. A few men respond immediately, though many are too shell-shocked to process orders. One veteran sergeant from the Eastern Front organizes a rear guard with mechanical efficiency. The battle for Omaha is effectively over. American forces have broken the Atlantic Wall's strongest defenses, but Müller's personal war is just beginning. The retreat inland, the regrouping, the knowledge that every subsequent defensive line will face the same overwhelming force. Müller stares at the wreckage visible through smoke beginning to clear in the late morning wind. The full extent of destruction becomes evident in unforgiving daylight. The beach is littered with remains of both armies, German fortifications reduced to rubble, American vehicles disabled in shallow water, bodies in feldgrau and olive drab scattered across sand. He had failed, not through lack of will or tactical error, but through material reality. His battalion had failed because the Atlantic Wall was a propaganda construct, more than military reality. But as American forces consolidate positions and move inland with practiced efficiency, Müller feels something beyond tactical failure, a profound guilt that he was part of a system that promised victory but delivered only death. He had been unable to stop the inevitable momentum of Allied production, logistics, and determination. He had been a component in a war machine that had already lost the industrial mathematics. Records later showed that Germany produced approximately 40,000 military vehicles in 1944. America produced 257,000. The arithmetic was unsustainable from the beginning. The bunker is silent now except for the distant sound of American voices and vehicle engines. The battle has moved inland toward Colleville and beyond, and Müller knows there will be no reinforcement, no counterattack, no restoration of the defensive line. The soldiers that remain are stunned, bodies bruised and broken from concussion and shrapnel, but their psychological wounds run deeper. Young men who believed in Fortress Europe now comprehend its fragility. The storm had passed overhead, leaving behind quiet devastation measured in thousands of casualties and the wreckage of German defensive doctrine. Müller looks at his watch. 09:45. In approximately 3 hours, the Americans had accomplished what German planning assumed would be impossible, establishing a viable beachhead against fortified positions. The silence feels heavy, oppressive. Somewhere inland, Fighting continues. Here on the beach, only the work of graves registration remains. Müller wonders abstractly about his own future. Retreat, regroup, defend again against the same overwhelming force. The calculus had changed permanently. Müller stands at the bunker entrance, looking across the beach now firmly in American control. There's no more fighting in this sector. Only the remnants of failed defense and the machinery of Allied logistics beginning to flow ashore. More vehicles, more supplies, more men. He can hear the radio crackling in his hand with fragmentary German transmissions, but there's no new order, no coherent plan, just scattered units trying to establish new defensive lines inland. His mind replays every decision, every order given or withheld. The mistakes seem obvious in retrospect. Too few mobile reserves, too much faith in static defences, too little understanding of Allied material superiority. But were they mistakes, or inevitable outcomes, of a war already lost in the factories of Detroit and Pittsburgh? Our intelligence summary later noted that American production capacity exceeded German output by a factor of 5 to 1 in most categories. The mathematics of attrition only work when you can replace losses. Germany could not. As he watches advancing American forces, establishing supply dumps and aid stations with impressive efficiency, Müller feels a deep, unshakable weight settling into his consciousness. The war will continue. Months more of fighting, more casualties, more destruction. But for him, this battle represents something final, the end of the illusion that defensive skill could overcome material disadvantage. A single haunting thought crosses his mind with crystalline clarity. What if different decisions had been made? Not tactical decisions on this beach, but strategic decisions years earlier. But the answer is lost in the wind, carrying smoke inland as he steps away from the bunker toward an uncertain future. He thinks of his wife in Stuttgart, his father's farm in Bavaria, a world that seems impossibly distant from this beach. Later records would show that Müller survived the war, surrendered in May 1945, and returned to civilian life. But June 6, 1944 remained the day his certainties died. The final moments of the battle for Omaha Beach fade into history books and official records. The American forces push forward with irresistible momentum, beginning the campaign that will end 11 months later in Berlin. For Müller and thousands like him, the battle was intensely personal, a day of failure, loss, and the shattering of illusions about German invincibility. It was a day he would never forget, marked by the smell of cordite and blood, the sound of naval guns, the sight of grey uniforms scattered across sand. The weight of history would follow him through subsequent retreats, across France, across the Rhine, into the final collapse. But for now, all that remained was deep silence, broken only by distant artillery and the sound of American voices calling to each other in an unfamiliar language. In the archive of the 352nd Infantry Division, a terse entry recorded, "Enemy established Beachhead Omaha sector, casualties severe, defensive line withdrawn." The numbers had already rewritten the war. The file closed without elaboration. The evidence spoke for itself.